In this demo, I'm going to show you how to create a Vue.js tree powered HTML page that basically uh, performs uh, insert, update, delete, and select using the ArcCloud web server and ArcCloud ArcNoSQL database. Okay, so ArcCloud is a solution that is made in Australia, and we are based in Ipswich, Queensland. And its applications include integration, ETL, automation, workflow, and it can be used as an alternative for Bespoke, SSIS, Azure Logic Apps, Azure Functions, AWS Lambda, AWS Step Functions. So we offer rapid development and rapid deployment, low code development, drag and drop orchestration designer, web-based interfaces, and wide range of connectors. So we are building new connectors and we offer the development of custom connectors. And we are available in iPaaS or self-hosted uh, or on-premise or VPC. So what is an ArcNoSQL database? So ArcNoSQL database is a document-oriented NoSQL non-relational database system that provides high performance, scalability, and flexibility for handling large amounts of structured and semi-structured data. And we have two connectors that is used to manage data in ArcNoSQL database. So the first one is the ArcNoSQL sender, which is used for uploading or updating JSON data to an ArcNoSQL database, and the ArcNoSQL receiver, which is used for retrieving JSON data from an ArcNoSQL database. So the ArcNoSQL sender payload can be an insert payload. So in the insert payload, you have an action insert that is included in the fields that is it's not going to be inserted in the document, rather it's going to, it tells the component, the ArcNoSQL sender component, that this particular document is going to be inserted to the ArcNoSQL database. Or if you omit the action field, it is translated as an insert command by the ArcNoSQL sender. For update operations, you specify an action of update, and that basically iterates through each of the fields other than the ID and updates those fields in the ArcNoSQL database. And the last but not the least operation is the delete. So you specify the ID of the document to be deleted. So you can combine these commands in an array, and you can send that in one batch. For the web API connectors, we have the web server, which is used for serving web API calls. So it listens for HTTPS requests, and it is capable of handling JSON, XML, or text payloads. The web response connector is used for sending response back to the caller of the web API. So what are the endpoints? So for the web server, so when you uh, put a web server connector in the orchestration designer, it exposes this particular URL. So when you deploy the orchestration in production, you have this URL, uh, which is served on port 5555. It's HTTPS secured, and it's secured by basic authentication. And for deb, there is the web a path is replaced by deb. So the web ID is a property in the web server configuration that identifies this particular endpoint, uh, and it ties it to that orchestration that you're creating. Vue.js 3 is a JavaScript framework for building user interfaces. It introduces the composition API, allowing developers to organize component logic into reusable functions. It has a smaller bundle size and enhanced performance, resulting in faster loading times. It also offers improved TypeScript support and upgrade from Vue.js to is seamless, ensuring background compatibility. With Vue.js 3, developers can build modern, performant applications. So let's start by by opening up a VS Code. So I have shared the a zip file, or which you can, and the URL of the repository where you can download the completed example. So I'll show you first the completed example. So I'm using a live server plugin for VS Code to serve the HTML. So this is the completed code. So you have uh, a customers and so records retrieved from the database, and you can uh, click on add to add record, uh, and save that. So well, okay, so that record is added at the end, and you can also edit that record. So click on save, and then you can delete that. Okay, so that's the completed application. So we'll look at the procedure and how to construct this. Uh, so I will switch back to VS Code. So we'll have a blank HTML page here, and what I'll do is I'm going to grab the files that needs to be included in the header. So we have in the files we have the bootstrap CSS, the bootstrap icon, which basically is used in the right hand side operations, like the icons for editing, deleting, updating, and we're using the styles, the bootstrap bundle min, and jQuery. We're using jQuery, which is needed by bootstrap, and the Vue.js 3 uh, files. So we have Axios for doing uh, Ajax calls, and Polyfill for the old browsers. So it handles compatibility with all browsers. And we have the Vue.js 3 JS. So next, I'm going to grab the header. So the header is basically just shows you the menu, the ArcCloud menu. So it does nothing here. So I'm going to cut that and put that in the demo. So next, we'll have the container. Yeah, so we'll create the container for the the app the table, and then we'll have the main and main class. Okay, next we'll do the container for the Vue tree, Vue.js. Uh, so we'll have a div, and then id is equal to app, and that will basically be is where we're going to render the table. Next, we'll have the is busy. So the loading when you're doing Ajax calls, we're going to put a an image that will basically show the loading. So I'll save this, and we're going to play that. So open with live server, and I'll open this in Safari. So this is how it looks like. You have the uh, menu. It does nothing, so it's just there for decoration. Okay, so next we'll continue. We will we'll put a JavaScript uh, section here. Okay, so this is where we'll put the Vue.js JavaScript. And what I'll do is I will grab the uh, the basic uh, Vue.js. So we'll have so this is the basic Vue.js. So we'll have the demo app is equal to new Vue, and then we will specify the element where it is going to be mounted, and that is the app. And then we have the data, and then we have mounted event listener, uh, and then we have the methods. So let me just check. Yeah, methods. Okay, so this is the basic uh, in the basic uh, shell. for the view. So okay, next we'll put some properties in the data. So we'll say is loading, and we'll say that is false, and we'll say that this is b if equal to is loading, and so this uh, loading image is going to be shown when only when we're loading, but otherwise it's not going to be shown. Now on the mounted, we're going to do an Axios. So we're also going to do a container for the records. Okay, so initially it's going to be an array, and then we'll have the columns. So we'll define columns. So we'll see we'll say columns. So I won't be using the same columns. We'll just use the same columns for uh, sim- simplicity. So I will define two columns. One is the header. So this will be the column that is going to be shown in the table, whereas these columns here is the actual column of the data. So the data in the data will have an ID field, an address, a city, region, postal code, country, phone, and PAX. And then this is the records, which will hold the array of data. Okay, next. So we'll render uh, the data in by using a table. So we'll say so we'll have a head and th, and we're going to iterate to each of the the column and display that using b4. Okay, so this is the expression for iterating uh, uh, for to each of the columns in the header. So for each of the columns in the headers, it's going to iterate, and it will assign the value to column, and index as the index of the iterator. So and then we'll display the column here. So this is the container for the action. Yeah. Next, we're going to iterate to each of the well, we'll save this and have a look at what we have. So that's what we have. So it's displayed the uh, column headers. So we're going back to it. So we'll put here a class equal to table. So this is the bootstrap class, and let's see what we have now. Okay, so now it's rendered uh, in by the bootstrap class. Next, so we'll put a title here. We'll say customers. Yeah. Next, we're going to iterate to each of the rows in the data and display that. So we'll have another tr here, and what we'll do is we're going to iterate to each of the rows. So we'll do a b4 equal to row, say row, uh, and then index in records. So, or we'll say record, yeah. So for each of the records in the array, we'll display that. Um, so we are, next we need to iterate to each of the columns in the record. So uh, we'll iterate. Uh, we'll do a td and we'll do a b4 equal to column uh, data index in record. So for each of the record, there are columns in the record. So we're iterating to the data in the record, or we'll call it yeah, we'll call it data or field. Yeah, field in the within the record. So we'll display that uh, with a span, and we'll say uh, we'll put field in there for now. So in the action, we'll put another uh, td here after all of the columns has been displayed. We add another td that will display the action. So we'll have a bootstrap icon here, and we'll say we'll first put an add. Uh, so uh, yeah, so we'll say uh, we'll copy this. Okay, and put that for now. So we'll save this and see what we have. So well, we don't have any record yet. So what I'll do is I'll add the record in the record section, so we can have some data in there. Uh, so what I'll do is I will grab some data. Uh, okay, so that's not right. So well, I'm just gonna grab a record here. So this is an array uh, of this object. So this object basically is one record, and you have an ID, and let's say city B. So ID 1, C, D, E, F, and then G, and then we'll have another record here. Okay, so we'll save that and we'll look at the resulting. So we now have an ID and we have the actions here at the right. So far so good. Uh, Next, we'll say it's a customer address. Yeah, contacts. And then what we're going to do is we're going to put an ad at the end of the the table. So we'll say button. Okay, so class put button primary. So and then we say v on click equals add row. We'll save that and have a look. Okay, on your record. Okay, so next we'll put some code in the add row. Uh, so in the methods, we'll put here add row, and we'll say function, and then we'll define a new row here. It doesn't seem to like that, so why is there missing? Oh well. Okay, so what we'll do is we'll do a bar new row, new record, equal to ID is we'll set ID blank, and then all the other fields are going to be blank. And then what we'll do is we'll say that the this dot records dot what's that, unshift, yeah, and then we'll put the new record in there. Okay, so there's an error. Well, so it's that. I'm not sure what's wrong with it. Let's try this. Yeah, let's have a look at what's going on. So I'm going to ship a to debugger, and so it's a function. Statements require a function name. Okay, I think I found the problem. So the problem is that uh, this shouldn't be a function. So the methods is should be just an open bracket, and so now we're going to save that and check. Okay, so we'll we'll do an insert, so that uh, okay, so we're going to use a push instead, so that it inserts it at the end of the row of the table. Okay, next we'll do the web API. So we'll uh, configure the web APIs. So we'll go to our cloud and log in using your registered account. So you can register and get a 15-day free trial. So the 15-day free trial is free, and you don't need to put in your credit card. So we'll log in, and once you're logged in, you get access to the orchestration integration menu where you have where you can do the orchestration designer. So what we'll do is we're going to uh, expose a web API that will accept requests uh, uh, to add for adding, inserting, or deleting records. So I'll grab a web API, web server, and then we'll set the password for the web server using secrets. So we'll create a secret, and the secret will hold the password. So we'll say this is the React, so the Vue.js web API uh, user and password. So the name will say Arc or Vue.js. And then set a password for that. Now we'll copy the secret ID and put that in the orchestration designer. So we'll put that. And the web ID is basically what you're going to put in the URL. Uh, and basically, it's going to identify this web server. So next, we're going to grab a sender, ArcNoSQL sender. So the JSON payload from the request is going to be sent to the Arc node NoSQL sender, and it will be uploaded to the database or deleted or updated. And then we'll send a response to the web server. So we'll put a response using a another request. So what we'll do is we'll query the uh, the database and for all of the records, and then we will return that to the caller. So to return that to the API caller, uh, we'll use a web response, and then we'll terminate the orchestration. Now, if there's an error in when executing the CRUD operation, we'll also send a response. We'll send the error to that is coming from the error node, and we'll send back that error to the caller as well. So we'll call this as uh, Vue uh, JS uh, web server. Okay, or CRUD operations. So we'll save that, and we're going to basically create a NoSQL sender as well. So we we're going to upload the data to a NoSQL database. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to the integration menu and click on ArcNoSQL. So in the ArcNoSQL, we're going to create a database. So we'll say Vue.js database. So we'll get the ID of that NoSQL database and put that in the designer. So we'll specify a collection called customer addresses, contacts, and we'll say that the input is not an array. So we're just going to be sending individual commands, one row at a time, and we'll say auto create collection. And we'll also do the same for the Arc NoSQL receiver. So we'll put the ID of the Arc database and the collection name. We'll put that in the collection name. And for the filter, we won't specify any filter. So that means all records will be retrieved. and then we'll save that. So we'll play this, and when you hit on play, it's going to open up a new window. So you have to disable the pop-up blocker. So now it's listening. This is the web ID. So in the PowerPoint presentation, so what we can do is we can test this using Postman request, and put a payload in there. So I'll launch Postman, and we're going to uh, create a, a request. So, well, I'll create a new request. So we'll create a new request, add request. So we'll say that this is a post request, and the ID should be we'll grab the ID here, and put that here. So we'll call that a Vue.js uh, CRUD request. So, and then we'll grab the ID. So it's ArcCloud COM port 555 API, and then it should be the dev for when you're playing it on the orchestration designer, and then the ID will take the ID of the web server that we created and put that in Postman. So in the ID field. Next, we'll define an authorization. So we'll say basic authentication, and we'll say that the password is Vue.js, and we'll set the body. Uh, so the header is content type is so for the body we'll say a row, and it should be a JSON, and so I think it's the content type is application JSON, and then in the body we'll send a payload. So what I'll do is I'll grab a payload. Uh, so the payload for an insert is this one. So you could specify a command, an action, or you don't have to specify that. Yeah, so okay, so we'll specify an action, and then we're going to send that. Okay, so basically the status is okay. It's it sent the data, and then it returned one record. So let's look at what happened in the orchestration. So the web server retrieved the data that was posted by Postman, and what it did is it sent that to the ArcNoSQL connector, which then sends the data to the ArcNoSQL database. So we'll look at the ArcNoSQL database that we created, which is the Vue.js database. So we'll look at the data, and it was able to create the customer contacts collection, and it was able to save the data from the web request. Next, the ArcNoSQL receiver basically you retrieve the data from the customer contacts. We didn't specify a filter, so it retrieved all of the records. So we have max documents there that limits the number of records returned, and then it sent that to the caller. That's why the postman uh, received that data. So let's look at the postman here. Yeah, so this data here that was received was the one that is given by the web response. So we'll use this URL, but what I'll do is I will deploy this to the to production. So we'll deploy that to production, and we'll get a new URL. Okay, so I'll close this and go back to the designer, click on save and close, and then uh, we'll deploy that. Okay, so once it's deployed, it is uh, the URL that you can use to call that is no longer this one here, the dev. So we'll save this and we'll clone that, and it's now going to be the prod URL, which is basically web. This dev is replaced by web. So we'll save that, and we'll have to modify this, otherwise it's going to throw an exception. So it's given a duplicate key error because the ALFKI ID is already existing. Yeah, so this is now working. So we'll grab this URL and we'll put that in the code. So we'll add a code here for the API. So we'll say that the CRUD API CRUD CRUD URL is this. Now we'll use that URL for making request. So when we do an add row and we hit save, uh, so we'll put a code here to basically save. So I will have a code here for the update function. And what we'll do is when we click on the add row, we'll say that we'll say that the edit index is the index that you specify. Oh, sorry, add row. We'll have an edit index here, so we'll have an edit index. This will track the record that is being edited. So, uh, so when we add row, we'll say the edit index is the last record. Okay, so and then what we'll do is we'll in the rendering, so we'll render something else if the edit index is so we'll say that bf the edit index is not equal to the index. uh, we'll say that we will render a read-only field, otherwise we'll render a an input, and we'll say the b just get that code from the finish one. Okay, so this one is date is doing a two-way data binding of the current row's current column to the input field. uh, so if the index uh, is not equal to 0, so this one here basically locks that field. So we'll take that off, and we'll just look at what it's doing here. So okay, so there's something wrong that. Okay, so I've seen the problem. The problem is that the we don't have a BLs in here. Okay, so now it's working. So we forgot the BLs. Now what we'll do is that when we click on the save, or the, so we'll click on save, it will save the record. So what we'll do is we're going to grab the record. So uh, we'll say bar payload is equal to the this that records index, and then we'll say that the uh, the payloads action is insert. Okay, and then we'll do an Axios call. So I'm gonna cheat here and grab the Axios call for the uh, this one. So we'll set the busy, and so while it's sending the data, it's going to give us that spinning icon, and then it's going to send a post request to the URL, the this URL that we have tested in Postman, and I will assign the this to a variable, because once uh, the Axios call returns, the this is no longer valid. So uh, let's say URL is this CRUD URL, the data is the payload, and then the header is an application JSON, and then the authentication we'll have to set to the Vue.js account that we created in the secret. Okay, so we'll use a basic authentication, and then when the Axios call comes back, we uh, we will assign the array. So we'll assign the records to the from the response data. So the response data will contain the payload, sorry, the response from the web request, the web response, and then we'll set the busy, uh, and then we'll set the edit index to -1 to make the field read only. Okay, so let's try this. I will save that, and this time I will take off the records. So we'll build records. Also, I would be populating the mounted. So the mounted basically is where you retrieve, you initialize. When Vue.js initializes, it calls the mounted event. And here we will retrieve all of the records. So we'll do that uh, once we created another web API call. So I'll save this, and then we'll test this. So initially we don't have a record. Well, I'll add a new record. We'll say ABC, and save. Okay, so what I'll do is I'm going to cheat here and grab this tr. Well, this should be the record, and then the say column. So Okay, so we'll, we'll take a look at that. I think we got a problem here. Okay, let's try this one. Okay. Okay, so let's try saving that. And we'll switch to the other browser. So index is not defined. Okay, so let's sure try that again. Okay, so we got something going here. Finally. Yeah. So next, what we're going to do, so we're able to add, and we're going to make this work. Edit is not defined, so we'll populate the edit. So edit is a function. So we'll say that this dot edit index is equal to index, and that basically will edit that row. We'll also populate the mounted. So what we'll do is we're going to create a web service that will basically uh, just return all of the records. So in the orchestration, we'll look at the orchestrations, and what we'll do is we'll clone the web server CRUD operations and edit that clone. So here we have a web server. We need to change the web ID because this is so we'll change that to 31, and, and then we will. So basically, this web server is going to listen for connections, and then it what I'll do is it will just return the result from the query, querying the ArcNoSQL, and basically the filter is blank, so it will grab all of the records and send that to the client. So for uh, retrieving all records, so we'll close that and deploy that to the backend. So then we'll grab the ID of the web server. So I'm going to refresh this. So I'm going to grab the ID and put that in the VS Code. So I will make a copy of this. We'll say CRUD. So this is API get all, and we'll say this is 31, or is it 31? Yeah. So this ID. And then we'll use this to retrieve the records. So we'll do an access call. Copy this and put that in the mounted. So we'll say is busy is true, and then we'll call a post to the get all URL, passing in data, which is an empty payload, empty JSON payload. So and then we'll set the authentication to the same account. So basically, this one here is using the login password ID, same as the other web server. So the login and password that was created for this, the other web API is going to be reused here. So let's save that, and let's have a look. Okay, so when I refresh this, it should come back and populate the records, uh, because the on mount is called, and mounted is called, and that basically retrieves the record from the database. So we'll have a look at that. Busy equal to true, and then I don't think I have the loading. I think this should be is loading. Okay. Okay, so next, have a look at that. So that busy icon is now coming. And when I add the record and save that, so it's also spinning. So next we'll do the delete. So we don't have an operation delete action yet, so we'll do the delete action. So we'll copy the edit and we'll set the so we'll grab the payload that was select deleted, and then we'll set the action to delete for that payload, and then we'll set the loading to true, and then call the actions uh, CRUD URL, passing in the payload and the authentication credentials. And then yeah, and then the records is assigned with the response data. So we'll test that. So I'll delete the last record. Oh, doesn't seem to be happening. So let's delete is not defined. Okay, so let's troubleshoot that. Oh, okay, so should we this delete? Okay, so it's working. So there's an error here, and when basically it returns, so there's a network error. So if I delete these, or if I edit it, okay, so I think it's happening because if we have a duplicate primary key, it it throws an error. So the error is because the response is not an array, so it's assigning that. So we have to detect the response and action appropriately. So if the response is so what I'll do is I'll copy uh, from the the finished one, and I'll explain that. So when we do a save, when we do a save and the response is not an array, uh, because it contains an error message. So if it's a string, then we'll do an alert. Otherwise, we check if it's an array, then we assign that to the records. So we do an alert, and we'll copy this and assign that to the other ones as well. And then to the delete as well. Okay, so we'll save that and just let's test. So we press this one, add a new record, same ID, we'll add the same ID, and let's save that. So it's saying, it's complaining that there's a duplicate key. So next, what we'll do is, so we have the edit, the delete, and the ads working. So let's have a look at this. Okay. Okay, so the save is trying to do an insert when you're editing. So what we'll do is we'll fix that. So when we do an edit, uh, and then we do a save. What it's doing is it's doing an insert. So we have to uh, say that it's an update operation. Okay, so the way we do that is by adding another parameter. So in the data, we'll say that this is adding. We'll add the adding, and we'll say that it's false. And if it's we didn't add row, we'll say that adding is true. And then in the save, we'll check if adding, then we'll say that the operation is an insert, whereas we'll say that the operation is an update. And then if it's successful, we will say that the adding is false. So let's have a look at that. So I think there's a problem again. So if I do an add new record and save that, that should go through. But if I'm editing it, it should go through as well. Yeah. Okay. So the delete is working. The edit is working. And the add is working as well. So that completes the demo.